If you are here, chances are you are quietly wrestling with confusion, frustration, or even self-doubt. You may have experienced waves of repeating numbers, vivid dreams, names appearing everywhere, and moments that felt undeniably guided only to arrive at a long, uncomfortable silence. No reunion, no clear movement, just time passing. This is often the moment when the ego begins to panic, asking whether you misread the signs, imagined the connection, or somehow failed your spiritual test. The mind spirals, searching for reassurance, trying to force meaning where certainty once felt natural. In today's message, we will gently dismantle that panic. This video is not here to invalidate your experiences or dismiss what you have felt. Instead, it offers psychological clarity grounded in spiritual intelligence. We will explore why the absence of signs does not mean abandonment, delay, or punishment, and why, in many cases, it is intentional protection. You will learn what is truly happening during the long waiting periods, how the higher self withdraws external validation to break ego dependency, and why the mind reacts so strongly when familiar spiritual feedback disappears. By the end of this video, you will no longer view silence as failure. You will understand it as a recalibration. The waiting will stop feeling like a test you are failing and begin to feel like a process you are mastering. This shift restores your power, moves you out of obsession and expectation, and brings you back into self-authority. When the ego no longer dictates the timeline, clarity replaces anxiety, and you stop waiting for signs to tell you who you are. If you stay until the end, this perspective will fundamentally change how you interpret synchronicities, silence, and your own role in the journey. Section 1. The true purpose of the twin flame journey. At its core, the twin flame journey was never intended to prioritize a physical reunion between two separate personalities moving through the world. This realization can feel unsettling at first, especially in a culture that equates love with possession, proximity, and permanence. Yet the deeper truth is simple and precise. The higher self, the universe, or source consciousness is not concerned with whether two egos successfully reunite in a romantic form. The journey was not designed to end in a relationship that validates the human identity. It was designed to dissolve the illusion that the identity is all that you are. The true purpose of the twin flame experience is remembrance. It is a gradual, sometimes uncomfortable remembering of your original nature. You are not a fragment searching for completion through another body. You are consciousness recognizing itself through reflection. The twin does not arrive to complete you, save you, or remain with you indefinitely. They arrive to activate memory of your wholeness, your sovereignty, and your nature as the universe experiencing itself through form. When the journey is reduced to a single outcome, whether two people reunite in the physical world, the essence of the experience is quietly lost. The focus shifts from expansion to control, from awakening to waiting. At that point, the ego steps forward and begins to define success, failure, worth, and meaning. The mind starts to measure love by time, behavior, commitment, and visibility. What was meant to awaken consciousness becomes a loop of expectation, longing, and self-abandonment. This perspective is not offered in judgment. The ego is not an enemy, it is a survival structure. It is deeply invested in physical connection, identity, and validation because those elements have historically ensured safety and continuity. Of course, the ego wants the twin to stay, to choose, to prove, to return. That desire does not make you weak, it makes you human. However, the twin flame journey does not exist to reward the ego, it exists to loosen its grip. Each separation, each delay, each moment where the physical outcome does not align with expectation is not a punishment. It is an invitation to shift perception. The universe gently but persistently redirects your attention away from the external mirror and back toward the source within you. As this redirection occurs, the question slowly changes. It is no longer, Will we reunite? But who am I becoming as I remember myself? The obsession with form gives way to awareness. The need for validation softens into self-recognition. What emerges is not loss, but clarity. Not abandonment, but alignment. In this way, the twin flame journey fulfills its true function. It does not bind two egos together. It dissolves the illusion that you were ever separate to begin with. Before we move into the next section, take a moment to pause and let this land. If this perspective challenges something you've been holding on to, that discomfort is not a mistake, it's often the first sign of awareness expanding. Reflection is where integration begins. Ask yourself gently where you may have been measuring your worth, progress, or spiritual success through outcomes in the physical world. If you feel called, share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Your reflection may help someone else feel less alone on this path. Or, if words feel unnecessary right now, simply type, "I remember who I am," as a quiet affirmation of your willingness to see beyond the ego and return to truth. Section 2. Why the higher self does not send reunion promises. If the true purpose of the twin flame journey is self-realization, then a deeper question naturally arises. Why would the higher self concern itself with predicting whether two physical egos will reunite in form? The higher self does not operate within the same framework as human longing. It is not invested in timelines, outcomes, or emotional reassurance. Its sole priority is awakening, bringing consciousness back into remembrance of its own nature. Signs, when they appear, are not meant to calm the ache of waiting or to sustain anticipation of a future event. They are not rewards for patience, nor are they confirmations that desire will eventually be fulfilled. Signs exist to redirect awareness. They are designed to interrupt unconscious patterns, loosen attachment to form, and guide attention inward toward truth rather than outcome. When interpreted correctly, signs expand consciousness. When interpreted through the lens of longing, they reinforce fixation. This is where many become entangled. In moments of uncertainty or emotional pain, people often seek external reassurance through generalized readings, spiritual content, or messages that promise reunion timelines, inevitable returns, or emotional closure. While these messages may feel comforting, they frequently serve the ego rather than the soul. They keep hope alive in a way that postpones surrender, encouraging the mind to remain invested in a future scenario instead of engaging with the present lesson. Rather than dissolving obsession, they can quietly extend it. This does not mean that all divination, intuition, or spiritual insight is false or deceptive. It means discernment is essential. True guidance does not inflate anticipation or bind awareness to an external result. Genuine guidance invites honesty, self-responsibility, and inner maturity. It challenges rather than comforts the ego. It asks the seeker to distinguish between what feels good to hear and what is actually true. The ego often seeks messages that affirm its desires, validate its waiting, and justify its attachment. The higher self, however, speaks in a different language. It does not promise reunion because reunion is not the objective. Integration is. Wholeness is. Freedom from dependency on form is. When growth is delayed by clinging to hope, that hope is no longer guidance, it becomes distraction. Hope that accelerates awakening is aligned. Hope that postpones self-realization is not. The higher self withholds promises not out of punishment or indifference, but out of precision. Its silence is intentional. It removes the future as a fixation so that presence can be reclaimed. In doing so, it invites the individual to step out of waiting and into becoming where true union has always existed. Section 3. What synchronicities actually mean. Encountering repeating numbers like 1,111, or seeing your twin's name appear again and again in unexpected places is often misunderstood. These experiences are rarely signals that a physical reunion is approaching. While the mind may rush to interpret them as confirmation of an external outcome, their true meaning points somewhere far deeper and far more significant. Synchronicities arise when internal shifts have occurred. They signal that lessons have been integrated at a subtle level, that unconscious patterns have loosened their grip, and that the ego has begun to soften or reorganize itself around a higher truth. These signs emerge not when something is about to happen outside of you, but when something meaningful has already happened within you. Alignment with the higher self is strengthening, and consciousness is recalibrating to a new internal state. The symbolism of repeating numbers reinforces this message. The number 1 represents unity, origin, and source consciousness. It speaks of beginnings not in the external world, but within awareness itself. When this number repeats, the message is amplified. It is the universe reminding you that separation is an illusion, that you are moving into a new phase of inner integration, and that the source you have been seeking externally has always existed within you. The repetition is not urgency, it is resonance. These moments are often misinterpreted because the ego instinctively looks outward for meaning. It wants signs to confirm attachment, to validate longing, or to sustain a narrative centered on another person. But synchronicities do not function as messages about someone else's actions, feelings, or return. They are communications from consciousness to itself. They are reflections of alignment, not predictions of outcome. When seen clearly, these signs carry a quiet but powerful instruction. They affirm that you are on the right path, not because a reunion is guaranteed, but because you are reclaiming your center. They remind you not to give your power away to anticipation, waiting, or external validation. They encourage you to continue inward, where integration, wholeness, and true union unfold naturally. Synchronicities are not promises of what is coming. They are confirmations of what is stabilizing within you. When understood in this way, they no longer fuel obsession or expectation. Instead, they restore sovereignty, grounding you in the knowing that the journey has always been about remembering who you are. Imagine someone who begins noticing 1,111 on clocks, receipts, and license plates shortly after they finally stop checking their phone for messages from their twin. Nothing dramatic has changed on the outside. There is no sudden contact, no conversation, no reunion, but something subtle has shifted within them. They have reached a point where the need for reassurance has softened. Instead of interpreting silence as loss, they feel a growing sense of calm and self-containment. In this moment, the synchronicities appear, not to pull their attention back to the other person, but to mirror this inner alignment. The repeating numbers arise as a quiet acknowledgement that they are no longer seeking completion through another body or outcome. They are choosing presence over waiting, wholeness over hope, and self-connection over fixation. The sign is not saying they are coming back. It is saying, you have returned to yourself. This is how synchronicities function at their highest level, not as predictions of future events, but as reflections of an internal turning point where power is reclaimed and awareness comes home. Section 4: Attachment, Validation, and the Ego's Interpretation. When the ego remains fixated on the physical form of the twin, it does not seek truth, it seeks reassurance. Its attention turns outward, scanning the environment for anything that can confirm hope, soothe uncertainty, or keep attachment alive. Names that appear repeatedly, familiar songs that surface unexpectedly, symbolic images, numbers, and coincidences all become charged with meaning. Yet these meanings are rarely neutral. They are filtered through longing rather than clarity, through desire rather than discernment. In this state, signs are no longer perceived as guidance. They are interpreted as promises. The ego does not ask, "What is this teaching me about myself?" Instead, it asks, "What does this mean about them? About reunion? About timing?" What once arrived as subtle nudges toward awareness becomes repurposed as emotional reinforcement. The sign itself has not changed, but the lens through which it is viewed has shifted from consciousness to craving. It is important to understand that the connection with the twin often does initiate profound growth. Encounters, separations, and mirrors can catalyze deep healing, self-examination, and awakening. However, the fixation that frequently follows is not a continuation of that growth. It is the ego's attempt to preserve attachment to the form that triggered transformation, rather than allowing the transformation to complete itself. Instead of integrating the lesson, the ego clings to the messenger. This is why signs can feel empowering in the beginning. At first, they awaken curiosity, expand perception, and validate an inner knowing. But over time, when they are used to maintain emotional dependency or sustain waiting, they become draining. The same symbols that once inspired presence begin to reinforce absence. The same synchronicities that once pointed inward begin to pull attention outward again and again. Signs were never meant to tether you to anticipation. They were never designed to keep you in a holding pattern, suspended between hope and disappointment. Their purpose is directional, not possessive, to guide awareness forward, not anchor consciousness to longing. When the ego interprets signs as proof to wait rather than invitations to evolve, the message has been distorted. At this stage, clarity returns only when attachment loosens. When the need for validation dissolves, signs regain their neutrality. They no longer promise, persuade, or provoke. They simply point. And what they point toward has never been the return of another, it has always been the return to yourself. Section 5. Separation as the catalyst for true learning. For the chaser, separation is not an interruption of the journey, it is the journey itself. This is where real transformation unfolds, not in reunion, not in physical proximity, but in the quiet, often uncomfortable space where illusion falls away and self-awareness deepens. Separation is the environment in which consciousness matures. It strips away fantasy and forces the individual to confront the inner mechanics of attachment, identity, and self-worth. Union with the self cannot occur while completion is still being sought through another ego. As long as fulfillment is projected onto someone outside of you, awareness remains divided. Reunion, in many cases, temporarily satisfies emotional longing, but it rarely serves the deeper evolution of the chaser. More often, it stabilizes the runner's ego while postponing the chaser's awakening. What feels like progress on the surface can quietly reinforce dependence beneath it. This is why the roles are often misunderstood. Many people believe they are the runner because they feel overwhelmed or resistant, yet those who truly resonate with this message, those who reflect, wait, question, and continuously examine themselves, are almost always the chaser. The chaser is not defined by pursuit of another person, but by an inward orientation that refuses to stop seeking truth, even when it hurts. Growth happens because the chaser turns the experience inward rather than outward. Reunion may feel euphoric, intoxicating, even transcendent. But that euphoria is rooted in ego relief, the temporary release of longing, fear, and uncertainty. It is the ego celebrating reassurance, not the self completing integration. When this is understood clearly, something subtle but powerful occurs. The urgency around reunion softens. The emotional grip loosens. Desire begins to dissolve, not through force, but through insight. True acceleration happens when attention shifts away from signs about them and toward awareness of you. When the mind stops asking what the connection means and starts observing what it reveals, separation then is no longer experienced as loss, delay, or punishment. It becomes the catalyst. It was always meant to be the space where dependence dissolves, identity recalibrates, and self-union quietly takes root. In this state, growth is no longer conditional on another's presence. it becomes self-sustaining. And paradoxically, when this level of awareness is reached, reunion, whether physical or not, no longer holds power over your sense of wholeness. If you have made it this far, take a moment to pause and recognize what that says about your level of awareness. This is not easy material to sit with, and the fact that you are still here means something within you is already shifting. Before we move forward, allow yourself to reflect honestly on what separation has revealed about you, not about the other person, not about timing or outcomes, but about your patterns, attachments, and growth. If you feel called, share your experience in the comments so others walking this path know they are not alone. And if words feel difficult right now, simply type the affirmation, "I choose self-union over attachment," as a quiet declaration to yourself. This is the moment where understanding turns into embodiment, and where the journey begins to move from seeking answers to becoming grounded in clarity. Section 6. Reframing the journey beyond duality. The ego is naturally drawn to what feels hopeful and reassuring, and just as instinctively, it turns away from what feels uncomfortable or confronting. This is not a flaw in character, but a function of duality itself. The ego organizes reality into preference and aversion, reward and threat, promise and fear. Within this structure, signs are filtered through desire. Anything that appears to point toward reunion is embraced, amplified, and held tightly, while anything that suggests release, delay, or inner redirection is dismissed or rationalized away. This is where confusion quietly takes root. A profound shift occurs when the perspective moves away from "what does this mean about us?" and toward "what is this revealing about me?" When the journey is reframed as a process of self-recognition rather than a pursuit of another person, the entire energetic landscape changes. You begin to see that reunion, as the ego defines it, often slows expansion rather than accelerates it. Growth does not require another ego to arrive, choose, validate, or return. It requires presence, awareness, and the willingness to stand in wholeness without external confirmation. From this vantage point, signs no longer function as emotional currency. They are no longer used to sustain hope, prolong waiting, or justify attachment. Instead, they either diminish naturally or are interpreted with clarity rather than longing. Their purpose becomes instructional rather than intoxicating. They begin to point inward, guiding you toward alignment, integration, and sovereignty rather than toward another body or outcome. This is not because the universe is withholding, it is because the lesson is completing itself. The higher self does not communicate in ways that reinforce dependency. It does not send messages that bind your sense of fulfillment, destiny, or worth to another ego. To do so would directly contradict the purpose of awakening, which is remembrance of self beyond form, beyond separation, and beyond external validation. Any sign that creates fixation, anxiety, or prolonged waiting is being misinterpreted through the lens of ego, not delivered by the higher self. True guidance always expands you. It restores your center. It returns power to the one receiving the message, not to the imagined role of another person within the story. When duality dissolves, so does the urgency to decode every symbol. You stop asking whether signs mean reunion and start noticing whether your nervous system is calmer, your awareness clearer, and your sense of self more stable. This is the real metric of progress. This is how the journey matures. The awakening path was never designed to keep you circling another ego. It was designed to bring you home to yourself. When that truth is fully integrated, signs no longer bind you, they liberate you. What this journey has been guiding you toward was never somewhere ahead of you, and it was never held by another person. Your twin was never meant to complete you, validate you, or return to make you whole. Your twin is not separate from you. Your twin is you mirrored, reflected, and revealed so that remembrance could occur. That is why you do not need signs of yourself coming back to yourself. You are already here, present, whole, complete. When the signs fall away, it is not because you have failed, been forgotten, or delayed. It is because there is nothing left to chase. The absence of reunion indicators is not abandonment, it is sovereignty. It is the moment the universe stops whispering and allows you to stand fully in your own authority. No more breadcrumbs. No more waiting. No more outsourcing your power to symbols, numbers, or imagined futures. Just awareness, grounded and embodied, here and now. This is the quiet arrival point so many mistake for loss. But in truth, it is the return to self, the return to clarity, the return to a state where longing dissolves because nothing is missing. When fixation fades, freedom emerges. When waiting ends, life begins to move again. And when the ego releases the story of reunion, the soul finally rests in recognition. So as you close this reflection, take a moment to notice where you are not emotionally, not mentally, but energetically. Feel the steadiness beneath the seeking. Feel the stillness beneath the noise. That is what has been guiding you all along. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment sharing what shifted for you. Or simply type, "I choose inner union over illusion." Your words anchor awareness not just for you, but for others walking this path beside you. Remember to like this video, share it with someone who may need this reminder, and subscribe for more reflections that bring you back to yourself. And when you're ready, continue the journey inward with the next video waiting for you below.